This is Lisa Miller and Associates Florida Insurance Roundup, your podcast on the people, issues, and regulations shaping Florida's insurance market. Now, here's Lisa Miller.
Welcome, friends. The Florida Legislature convenes its 2019 session this coming Tuesday, March 5th. The big insurance issue, the growing cost of property insurance claims litigation, is front and center. But there are also bills that would change Florida's no-fault auto insurance laws and more than 200 bills funding much-needed Hurricane Michael relief to the mostly poor 14 Panhandle counties still struggling with debris cleanup and recovery. I'll spend a lot of time over there and I'll be closely watching these bills. But there are other issues lawmakers are addressing as well as of interest about whether to allow smokeable medical marijuana and whether holding or touching your smartphone while driving should be made illegal. Of course, in the interest of roadway safety. We're happy to have with us today Jim Saunders, Executive Editor for the News Service of Florida. I've known Jim since I started in regulation in 2003, and what an incredible writer, and what he does to keep us educated in the press is simply amazing. He's been doing reporting and educating his readers for over 30 years. Jim, welcome to the Florida Insurance Roundup.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You know, the topics that I think we should touch on today, of course, are property insurance, which is near and dear to my heart, and you've heard about the assignment of benefits issue and that attorney's fees are driving it. The other side says no, the insurance companies are bringing the lawsuits. The reason we've got so many problems is because the insurance companies aren't paying their claims timely. What do you see being some of the issues you may cover and that may be important this session?
Well, I think AOB is the main event in the insurance world, that's for sure. There's all kinds of insurance issues out there, but I think everybody's mostly, the biggest focus is on this. The attorney's fees are the key issue, at least as I see in the whole debate. The Senate has tried, Senate Banking and Insurance Committee brought up a bill that would have just gone straight at limiting attorney's fees. That didn't make it out of committee in its first stop. So they've gone back to the drawing board and trying to rework that. We were told last week by the Senate President that the Senate Banking Insurance Chairman, Broxson, as well as Senate Judiciary Chairman David Simmons have been working behind the scenes to try to come up with a new bill that might make it out of that committee and start moving as the session goes along. But it's a complicated issue. It's very heavily lobbied. There's a lot of people on both sides and coming at it pretty hard. I mean, it's a big money issue. It started out in South Florida, but it's kind of moved around the state. So, and the insurance commissioner, David Altmiter's become pretty aggressive in terms of calling for changes. So there's a lot of different factors there, but I think that truly is the sort of the main event, if you will, in the insurance world for this session. And this bill is supposed to come up in Senate and a revised bill is supposed to come up in Senate Banking and Insurance on Monday. I have not seen it yet, but I think we might have a better feel at that point as to what direction this might start to take. I have a feeling it's going to have to be a little more nuanced than the initial version, which was pretty much just a full-on attack on attorney's fees.
Absolutely, and I think nuance is the word. And you hear, and I hope for our listeners, we'll make sure to post when that meeting is on Monday afternoon so that we can watch the debate. But I think when I listen to the people that come to the podium and testify, you have contractors who say, I can't get paid without one. You have consumers saying, I can't talk to my insurance company because I signed one, and you have insurance companies saying we can't do anything because of one. So it just makes you wonder where is this going to land. I know from my perspective, I deal primarily with consumers who have signed one. I do that as a public service. They find me on the internet, and I've talked to so many of them. I've interviewed them on my podcast who've said, I can't believe I signed it and I wish I hadn't. So that feeds right into Hurricane Michael. That's our latest storm. I live an hour and a half, 2 hours from Panama City. I know you've been over there, and you'll see the canvassers and the signs on the side of the road of people that are trying to get folks to sign up with them to repair their roof or fix their water. I know there's a lot of discussion about how much money should we pump into that part. What are you seeing? You've worked many hurricanes, the response, the recovery. What's your perspective about what's going on with Hurricane Michael?
Well, it's first off, I can on the AOB issue and Hurricane Michael.
Right.
I think that's sort of a wild card in this whole AOB debate is that there are so many people out in the Panhandle who are suffering, and if you look at there's on both sides, it kind of comes into the AOB debate because you say there's some. I keep hearing there's fly-by-night contractors out there trying to sign people up for work. On the other hand, I hear people say, I can't get my roof repaired. So it's kind of a wild card that plays into that whole political debate as well. But your broader question, Hurricane Michael is going to be a big issue for this session in a lot of ways. But I think one of the keys is the budget issues that are involved. There have been hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bills filed already, appropriations bills, trying to get assistance for all kinds, hospitals, schools, you name it out there. The interesting part about, or I shouldn't say interesting, but sort of the unique part about this hurricane is that it wasn't a massive, wide-ranging like Irma was, which started in the Keys and wound up causing flooding in Jacksonville. It was crazy. But this was far more focused or more. But where it went, the damage is so bad. You drive through Bluntstown, which I've done several times in the last few months, and it is just like. Senator Monfort said it, but it looks like a bomb went off. Mm-hmm. So there are trees down everywhere. There's businesses destroyed. There's homes that have the roof. Just awful. So, it's going to be a big budget issue. They've got to figure out how much they can want to spend on it, when the federal government will reimburse it. So there's a lot of issues like that. It's not just a budget issue, though, too, because we're hearing a lot from the agriculture community. For instance, timber is a big industry in the Panhandle, big industry, not only for the growers, but the mills and everything else. And you don't have to drive far out there and see trees down everywhere. So, they took a big hit. So the destruction of that storm is really going to be an issue. I think some people in the Panhandle are worried, though, that the damage was so focused on their area that the people in, you name it, Jacksonville, Miami, don't really have a clue as to how bad it is. That could hurt them in trying to get assistance.
Well, I know you and your colleague reporters, I still see it in the news. Occasionally, I think that the residents over there are appreciative every time someone does a story about it. But for my listeners, I often say, I hope that you are able to drive through the destruction, and then I hope that you never see it again, because it is just that bad.
Well, and as you alluded to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but as you alluded to, a lot of those areas are rural and low income too. So that's another dynamic in this debate, which is, whether the assistance needs to be even greater for those circumstances.
Absolutely. You think about the median income over there. One of the largest employers is the Department of Corrections.
Right. Correctional
officers make less than an average of $30,000 a year. Many did not have insurance, couldn't afford it. So we just have to hope that we can balance what this budget does, and we have to balance it and help them as well. Moving on to medical marijuana, there was a lively appropriations committee meeting last week, and of course, one of the most vocal senators in our state is Senator Jeff Brandes. He, for the past couple of years has talked about medical marijuana. He calls those that have licenses the cartel. He's a big believer in free markets, and he's just so entertaining to follow. And evidently in that appropriations committee, he asked some pretty pointed questions. Were you at that committee meeting? Did you watch it?
I was not. One of our reporters, Derek Ham, covers medical marijuana night and day.
She's amazing.
I leave it to her.
She's amazing, and I read her story. So, one of the questions that I think he asked was how much were those licenses worth once they were received and they got through the bureaucratic maze, whatever company, and the testimony was like $80 million.
Right.
And that really touched his heart. So are we going to be able to smoke it, Jim, by the end of session? Are we going to be able to get licenses? Are we going to have people that want, one of the things they want to do is to take away some organization. Right now, the requirement is they have to do everything. They have to grow it, they have to process it, they have to distribute it. And what Senator Brandes is saying, no, if you're a great distributor, so comment on what you think is going to happen.
Well, I think there's two issues. One is the smoking issue, and Governor DeSantis made pretty clear, in fact, he's kind of drawn a line that says, you are going to, telling the legislature, we are going to allow smokable medical marijuana. The House and the Senate have somewhat different bills. There's some differences in the details of that, but they're both heading in the direction to allow smoking of medical marijuana. Again, it's going to be restricted. It won't be just totally, walking down the street kind of thing. But I think that part of it will happen, and I think that the governor's made pretty clear that he's going to make it happen.
He's going to make it happen.
The other issue, though, which you referred to as the regulation of the industry, I am not as confident or sure that there is going to be a lot of regulatory changes. Ray Rodriguez, the House Health and Human Services chairman, told DARA this week that they want to take it slow. Don't expect big changes. There are issues in terms of the numbers of licenses that medical marijuana operators can get. There's also restrictions on the amount of dispensaries, the actual retail stores that they can operate. There's the issue that you referred to, which is called what they call this vertical integration. Great right. terms, all these terms that people come up with, but where essentially, like you said, each operation has to do all of the functions, and there's a lot of question about why is that? Why can't one person grow it and another person sell it? So there's a lot of unhappiness with some of those things. But this legislature's taken a very go slow approach on this issue. It's gotten them into a whole lot of litigation, too. Yes. There's a bunch of cases sitting up at the First District Court of Appeal right now on these very issues. But they don't seem to be in any rush to redo the regulatory system other than the smoking. There may be some tinkering around the edges. One of the issues is to make it easier for veterans to be able to have access to identification cards that are needed to be able to actually receive medical marijuana, to make those free for veterans or low cost. There's some issues like that I think people rally around, but some of these big money regulatory issues, I think I would be surprised to see sweeping changes, at least in those areas.
Very interesting. We'll be watching that one for sure. Speaking of big money, let's talk about algae bloom and water quality. Mm-hmm. There's the governor came out with a big, bold statement. He's going to hire a resiliency officer. He's a science officer, technologist. He has put in his budget close to $700 million to clean up our water. Algae bloom has just been on everybody's mind, red tide. And of course, when you have algae bloom plus red tide, it's just worse than anything. We had both of them come. What are your thoughts about funding water quality issues and where you think we're going to end in the beginning of May?
My hunch is that there will be a large package, but I'm not sure it will go to the extent that the governor's asking for. I mean, he's asking for a lot of money, and we keep getting signals from the legislative leaders that, there may not be as much money out there as what some people think. So, I think he'll get quite a bit. I think he surprised some people with his aggressiveness on this issue. One thing I keep in mind on this issue, though, is, a lot of those areas that were really affected by this, by both red tide and algae last year, are very big Republican areas.
Yes.
And I don't think you can put that out of your mind. I mean, Lee County, Martin County, Sarasota County, those sorts of areas are very big Republican areas. And I think he's very cognizant of those issues in those areas. Again, I do think there will be a significant package coming out. Some of the things he can do by himself, and he's already started it. These resiliency initiatives and stuff, they can do some of that within the Department of Environmental Protection, and they've already started doing that.
I like his vision for what we need to do. Of course, in my humble opinion, our whole world revolves about water. We don't make enough. How do we clean it? Where do we transport it? I mean, water.
Well, in Florida, it's always, you can go back in history in Florida for, developing South Florida involved water issues.
No doubt.
And many other areas in the state.
All about it. Rounding up kind of our top topics, we hear about automated vehicles, and I follow it kind of peripherally. I know you do too. One of our senators drives an autonomous vehicle. It's fun to watch and see what happens when he takes his hands off the wheel, and others you see the charging stations all over town. And, I'm almost 60 years old, and I hope I can see it in my lifetime, what's going to happen there. And I'd like to think that our legislature is going to be progressive in that. And, whether you cover those meetings or not, I wonder if that issue is going to dim with the other pressing monetary issues, because it takes appropriations and money to retrofit our highways for putting these autonomous vehicles on them. So just comment if you, in terms of budget priorities, what do you think will be, let's just say 1 to 5. If you were going to guess and you had a crystal ball, what'll be the top funder? What'll be the next one going down the list of all the priorities and budget requests this year? What do you think it'll be?
Well, I'm not really sure about autonomous vehicles, whether it's not a priority I've heard from legislative leadership.
Gotcha.
So that,
okay.
There is another big transportation initiative that Senator Galvano, Senate President, is focusing on, which I think is going to be the big transportation issue of the session, which is he wants to extend the Suncoast Parkway from the Tampa Bay area all the way up to the Georgia border. He also wants to build essentially an expressway from Polk County down to Collier County, which is another issue that's been talked about for years and years. He also wants to extend the turnpike from Wildwood over towards the West Coast. So he is, he has a vision for some major transportation development over the he told us it basically would take a decade to play all this out. But he wants to get it started. So I think the transportation issue we're going to be hearing about is the Senate President's priority. There may be some issues like the autonomous vehicles issue that are smaller dollar amounts, and they may be able to make some inroads in those issues. But in terms of big money, I haven't heard anybody really talking about that being a major priority. I mean, just overall, education budget is always going to be a big priority. We've got Speaker Jose Oliva. He's constantly focused on healthcare costs, talking about trying to find ways to drive down healthcare costs. But, the Medicaid budget is $28 billion. I mean, it's huge. And, those types of issues. There's also a lot of issues in the prison system. A lot of wardens testified a week or two ago in committee about the problems in the correction system, and a lot of that's going to cost money. So there's a lot of competing demands out there in addition to the environmental issues that we discussed earlier.
Well, Jim, that about wraps us up. That's going to keep us really busy. Session starts on Tuesday, March 5th for our listeners. Any of you that might want to follow some of these issues, we're happy to answer your calls and your request. And I just want to thank Jim Saunders, our guest today, executive editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks again.
And if there's an interest in wanting to subscribe, if I may do a commercial for you, Jim.
We love subscribers.
We do, and I am a loyal subscriber. You can simply go to newsserviceflorida.com. Newsserviceflorida.com. I highly recommend you taking a look at that and subscribing. I get something in my box at least 4 or 5 times a day. And they're on top of everything. So with this session coming this Tuesday, we have a lot going on. We talked about the assignment of benefits, the AOB issue, medical marijuana, and all the various issues that the legislature has to tackle. And Jim, this will be my close to 35th session on and off, working in and out of the legislature. So I've got my work cut out for me. But in our podcast show notes, we'll make sure to link all of the information about a lot of these issues for you. And if you don't see something, we're happy to direct you. So what do you think? We want to hear what you're doing as Floridians every day, going to work every day. A lot of these issues affect your pocketbook and how you live your quality of life here. We will look forward to hearing your comments or questions. You can call us at 850-388-8002. That's 850-388-8002. Or, of course, email me. I love hearing from you, Lisa Miller at Lisa Miller Associates with an S on the end.com. Lisa Miller at lisamillerassociates.com. So that's it for this edition of the Florida Insurance Roundup. I thank you for being a part of it and listening to it and being such loyal followers of our work. Remember, at Lisa Miller Associates, we've got a passion for good public policy and client success. And I'm Lisa Miller, and until next time, I look forward to seeing you on the trail. Thank you.
This has been Lisa Miller and Associates Florida Insurance Roundup, your podcast on the people, issues, and regulations shaping Florida's insurance market. For more information on today's program, please visit us on the web at www.lisamillerassociates.com.